Welcome back, DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast, looking back at the last event at World Wide Technology Raceway in what almost was a very similar race to Indianapolis. Scott Dixon comes out with a handy caution and then performs an absolute strategical miracle to win yet again and delay Alex Palou's championship. We'll say it again, what a performance from Scott Dixon, pulled the rabbit out of the hat yet again.
Yeah, I mean, for anyone else it would be a completely unthinkable victory, but for Scott Dixon, it just isn't. He manages to produce this sort of thing time and time again. And yeah, you might say, oh, he got lucky with the timing of a caution, but you know, he makes the most of the fortune where others don't. You know, his management is just, it's on another level. Obviously, they spoke a lot on the broadcast about it being a tyre limited race, but Dixon went into a fuel save as well. So essentially he was having to manage his tyres and his fuel to go on two just ridiculously long stints at the end of the race. And no one really expected him to execute it. You thought even if he tried, he might have to come in for a late splash and dash, but wasn't the case. Others that tried the strategy fell by the wayside. You look at the likes of Kyle Kirkwood, Will Power, Romain Grosjean. Dixon just excelled again. And yes, people have mentioned, oh, the Honda's clearly, you know, stronger in terms of fuel saving, but when there are Andretti cars attempting that strategy, having pitted even later than Dixon, he just still managed to stay out while they had to bite the bullet and come in. It was just yet another remarkable win. And you see him at the front of the field and you think, how did he get there? Or just then, oh no, he'll have to come in, and nope, he doesn't come in. He stays out. Another long stint just continues. And the margin of victory in the end, 22 seconds. The previous best at Gateway was Juan Pablo Montoya, I think, by 11 seconds, which, you know, just speaks to what a remarkable job Dixon did. In yet another track that really is Josef Newgarden's home. He'd won the most recent races there, and it didn't quite work out for him, as we will come on to. But yeah, Dixon is ending the season strong, and even when you don't think he has the best pace, he just does the most unthinkable things and executes things and strategies that just nobody else can even contemplate trying to execute. It's just special. I woke up this morning still in awe of what he'd done. It was very impressive. So as others bailed, Dixon just kept going, and he ended up being the only one on that strategy and just absolutely pulled it off in just the most emphatic fashion.
I was going to say, it's Dixon doing what Dixon does best, you know. I feel like no one else could have pulled it off, and also the commentators, when they were saying it, they was like, surely he's not going to win, you know, he has to pit again, you know, he needs to fuel save and all this. And I feel like everyone wasn't betting against him, but there was ones like in disbelief that he could do it, and he showed that he did. And, you know, crossing the line, especially with that gap, he was waiting for ages for everyone to kind of like combine. You don't realise like how big a gap, like, was it 22 seconds is, until you're there waiting for Pato O'Ward to kind of like cross over and everyone else. But it's just the most Scott Dixon way of winning, and there's no other way to say it, you know. He's proven that, you know, he is kind of one of the best, if not the best. And yeah, that's just Scott Dixon. There's no other words to describe it, really.
It's just the fact that he can not be a factor in races in the slightest, and then all of a sudden he just appears. And the fact that he can do it time and time again, yes, it's partially credit to the strategy, but, you know, he hasn't had the same strategist throughout his career, and he can still manage to pull these results off. So it just speaks to his greatness, and, you know, he's one of the greatest drivers we've ever seen in motorsport. It's just unfathomable that he can pull that sort of thing off time and time again.
That was the statistic going round, where since IndyCar returned to Gateway in 2017, the total cumulative time gap between first and second was something around 4 seconds. And Dixon's win was 22 seconds. Yes, it was because he was on a completely different strategy. But as we said, he was the only one who made that strategy work. And all the years of experience really showed in Scott Dixon's, not only this week, but in Indianapolis a couple of weeks ago as well. And to have two performances almost so similar, kind of pops out of nowhere through a caution and then does the unthinkable. It's just such a testament to his ability. And Pato O'Ward said after the race, Scott Dixon just did Scott Dixon things, and it's just so true. No one else on the entirety of that grid would be able to do what Dixon did.
Yeah, I mean, his consistency this season is just quite bewildering, really. He's got a better, worse finish than Alex Palou, aside from Long Beach, which now at this stage is starting to look quite costly in a way, because he's only 74 points back from Palou, and he was on for yet another top 7 really in Long Beach before the contact with Pato O'Ward that ultimately curtailed his race, meant he finished 27th and last. It's a shame, really, because if it wasn't for that race, we could really be speaking about a championship battle still being on almost, because Dixon has now pulled out these back-to-back wins. Yes, Palou still has 4 victories. Dixon only has 4 podiums, but to have finished inside the top 7 every single race bar one, it's remarkable, really. And Dixon will feel hard done by that heading into the final 2 races, while he is still mathematically in championship contention and the only other driver in contention other than Alex Palou. He will feel like he should be closer and there should be more of a fight, because it still looks like quite a foregone conclusion that Palou will win, barring complete disaster. But Dixon has produced a season that is worthy of a championship.
This sort of level of consistency, we haven't really seen any mistakes out of Dixon this year. And he might even look at the Indy 500 where he had that bizarre tyre issue on his first stint. And that and Long Beach only seemed like the only real drop points of the season. Yes, Palou sort of had that sensational streak in the middle of the season, but Dixon started to have that run of form now that Palou had earlier in the season. And it's been a sensational couple of run of races. These last 2 races is what Scott Dixon's all about. He's statistically one of the greatest, if not the greatest, and he just proves it again on track. It's a real testament to what a driver he is. And even when you look at the championship, yes, it almost looks like a foregone conclusion, but I think Scott Dixon proved you can't count him out until he's mathematically out.
Yeah, precisely. And I think one pattern over the season is it doesn't really matter where he qualifies. He qualified 15th in Indianapolis, he qualified 16th at Gateway, still goes on to win. I mean, even when he qualified 23rd in Road America, he finished 4th. So it's just incredible what he can do from regardless of where he ends up in the pack. He always manages to cycle to the front, or at least towards that lead group.
That's big about Dixon. Obviously, we'll quickly touch on Palou in the championship. We kind of knew this wasn't Palou's best track as such. He finished in 7th place. Actually, a really quiet day for Palou. We didn't see much of him at all. But championship will have to wait to Portland. The gap is 74 points. So I think we said a podium will seal Palou the title in Portland. And that's with Dixon winning. I mean, yeah, fairly quiet day for Palou. I don't think we expect for the championship today, but I think he'll be looking fairly nicely at Portland.
Yeah, I mean, in my notes, all I've written about Palou is that, it was a solid qualifying. He qualified 5th, I think, and dropped down to 14th because of his unapproved engine change penalty. So it's a measure of his progress, really, that not one of his strongest tracks. He can still qualify up in the top 5. And then I didn't notice him during the race, really. He was one of those who kind of just, you saw him occasionally, but he wasn't really threatening the leaders, but he was always within the top 10. And yeah, brought home a solid 7th. And again, as we've mentioned with Dixon, it's consistency, and that is key in IndyCar. And he has, proven that with even this sort of result, which is down there with his worst. He, still can remain right in pole position to take the championship, and possibly even before the final round, which would be the first time that's happened after, I think, a 17-year run of it going down to the final race.
Obviously, the championship was a possibility in Gateway, but we kind of knew that all was pretty unlikely. But the man we did think would probably put a stop to that would be Josef Newgarden. As you said earlier, he's won the previous 3 races at Gateway. It could arguably be his best track out of all of them. He didn't take pole, but he got P1. He led the field to green because of McLaughlin's penalty. And it was pretty smooth sailing for the majority of the race, and strategy was pretty close to him and O'Ward, but it all kind of fell away for Josef Newgarden.
Yeah, I mean, from the outset in practice, it kind of looked like it was going to be yet another Josef Newgarden weekend. He was quite some way clear of the field really quite early on in practice, which I recall being the same in Iowa before he went and really swept that. But it didn't feel like the same dominant Josef Newgarden short oval weekend from there. He was off the pace in qualifying compared to McLaughlin, albeit still qualifying second and leading the field to green, given McLaughlin was also docked 9 places for an engine change. He got a good getaway, Newgarden, but from there it really looked like it was him and O'Ward were the 2 real contenders for the win, and they both stayed in tandem with one another for quite a while. They swapped round after one sequence of pit stops, but by then it was kind of a little bit meaningless because Dixon had found his way to the front, and you were starting to really think, oh, he's going to do this. And Newgarden and O'Ward, just like with Graham Rahal at the Indy GP the other week, they were feeling as though they should be fighting for the win, but Dixon's just there miles ahead somehow. It was not the same dominance from Newgarden. You felt he was under pressure a little bit more than Iowa, for instance, and with the oval record on the line, he eventually, when Dixon looked like he was going to win, Newgarden just said he was just going for it and ultimately ended up hitting the wall. Came out in traffic after stopping behind Devlin DiFrancesco and tried to push up a bit high, got into the marbles, which were a real issue for quite a few drivers, and got into the wall. It wasn't any major shunt, but dealt him damage that ultimately ended the race and stops him from becoming the first driver in the last 100 years, I think, to sweep the season for ovals in a season that has more than a single oval. So, it was a shame, really. It would have been nice to see him, pick up this what would have been a deserved record. Really, it would have been his 6th successive oval win, and obviously the one before that was the Iowa race that he was going to win anyway before the mechanical failure. But ultimately the crash probably didn't cost him the win. The odds looked against him anyway, and you look how far O'Ward finished behind Dixon. I think Newgarden was possibly behind O'Ward at that point anyway, at least in terms of I don't know what the situation was at that stage, but
Newgarden had done his final stop and O'Ward was still yet to pit, from what I remember.
But O'Ward, I believe, was in clean air, then Newgarden came out in traffic, which was ultimately one of the reasons he crashed, because he was just trying to push it a little bit hard. There were quite a few issues with traffic actually throughout. I think a lot of drivers, came out of the race saying, oh, that was tough, and not necessarily just because it was physical, but also because negotiating the traffic was an issue. I know O'Ward was disappointed with lap cars, but as we've spoken about in the past, blue flags are slightly more difficult on ovals. Maybe it gets easier as the laps are a bit longer, as it is in Gateway compared to Iowa, where you have thousands of passes. Traffic seemed an issue, and for Newgarden, may have contributed a bit to his crash, but he was pushing. He didn't have much to lose in the end. It was a shame for him, but he wasn't going to win anyway, even if he didn't crash.
It was a shame to go out in that way, because you don't want to go out in that way when the record's on the line. I think if Dixon wasn't in the mix, it would have been really good to see him and Pato O'Ward battle towards the end, with O'Ward having that I need to win attitude, and Newgarden having I want to win all the oval races. That would have been quite a thrilling finish, I feel. Obviously, we didn't quite get it in the end, but Newgarden will still look back on it as a positive year. Winning 4 or 5 ovals is still an incredible achievement, and obviously he's got the Indianapolis 500 as part of that. And although maybe in some regards it's been a frustrating year for Newgarden overall, he can look back with a lot of positives. And obviously he's now officially out the championship picture, but I still think there's a lot to look back on with in a positive manner for Josef Newgarden.
I think for Newgarden, it might not be too bad for him that he's not finishing second in the championship again, because that would be the 4th successive year, and now it looks, I think it's a long shot, near enough impossible that he catches even Scott Dixon now. I think the gap there is, the gap there is quite large now. So we'll finally break that duck of 3 successive second place finishes, even if it is a 3rd place. But hopefully next year, for his sake, Penske can. Well, at best, yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, we'll get onto that because he's under threat from a teammate.
And O'Ward.
And O'Ward too, yes, indeed. Yeah, I think for Newgarden, it's just been another case of that inconsistency, really, that we spoke about last season that really cost him in the end last year, obviously with a bit of misfortune last year. And there's been misfortune this year as well at the end of the day, but I think next year has to be the year that they've really just managed to get on top of that consistency that you look at Palou and Dixon and what they've managed.
Let's have a look at the rest of the podium in Gateway. The first kind of on the, as I said, the conventional strategy was Pato O'Ward. A pretty good weekend from O'Ward, to be honest. He qualified 4th, obviously promoted to 3rd after McLaughlin's penalty. Everyone's qualifying position is different, so this podcast is difficult from the start. O'Ward challenging Newgarden for the majority of the race. Whether he would have beaten Newgarden, it remains to be seen. But he's running pretty well. He was first in the conventional strategy. Obviously, when it became clear Dixon was in a league of his own, there's nothing much O'Ward could do. But a 7th podium of the season. He's got 2nd most behind Palou and goes pretty well at Gateway. I think that's his 3rd runner-up spot of the track, and a pretty decent weekend for O'Ward.
I'd really love to see the battle to continue between Pato O'Ward and Newgarden, because it was always close between them, and I feel like one person would be ahead, and all of a sudden it'd switch, and it'd just keep on going back. And I feel like if Newgarden would have stayed in and not crashed out, it would have definitely been like a really close battle, just to kind of say, but it is what it is, and hopefully we can see them battle again, but it won't obviously be on an oval. So
I think really it's, as I mentioned, it's a bit like what the situation was with Graham Rahal during the Brickyard weekend, that O'Ward probably did enough to win the race. You look how everyone other than Dixon just completely faltered on that strategy, but because Dixon is still there and still producing these masterful performances, it's robbed O'Ward of what could easily in another world be, say, even his 3rd win of the season, and yet here we are, and he's still not got any. And it looks, Portland's not a bad track for him, but it doesn't look great for O'Ward, the outlook in terms of picking up a win before the end of the season. And yeah, he just could not close that gap to Dixon at the end. It wasn't really coming down at all, which just spoke to, it's just unbelievable the pace that Dixon still managed, despite being on this fuel save and sort of back against the wall in that respect. It was, quite remarkable, really. But, it was a really solid weekend for O'Ward, I think, to be really challenging Newgarden and even looking to get the better of Newgarden before Newgarden had this incident was, really encouraging for O'Ward.
Yeah, another pretty strong showing, and he proves again why he is one of the top over racers in IndyCar. That's obviously his third podium of the season on and over out of the 7. And again, it's kind of the more smooth, consistent Pato O'Ward approach we're seeing. Much better on his tyres and his fuel run. He just must be frustrated that win hasn't come yet. Obviously, St. Pete in Texas, he was pretty unlucky. Gateway, and you could say he was unlucky, but as he said, Scott Dixon was doing Scott Dixon things. And obviously, you mentioned how Dixon, if it wasn't for Long Beach, could be in the championship battle. But you also look at Pato O'Ward in the same context. He's having a pretty good run of form. Had he not had his moments of badness in Long Beach, in Detroit, even in Indy, again, he'd be right up there. If he took an average of, let's say, 5th place in each of the races, which would not be impossible, he would be, I think, only 30 points off Palou. And it's slightly disappointing for O'Ward because that could have been there, but ever since those moments he's had a much more consistent season, has proved yet again today, and he got the maximum he could on the road, and I think there's still a lot to take from it. As such, any other podium finisher, David Malukas. It was actually a pretty quiet weekend for David Malukas, but he's becoming a bit of a gateway maestro after coming second last year. And as I said, it was a pretty quiet day all round for Malukas, but he was on the right strategy at the right time, and he ended up finishing very respectable P3. He was only about a tenth or two off Pato O'Ward for second as well.
Yeah, I think I'd even extend that to saying he's becoming a bit of a short oval and even oval master when you considered he finished fourth at Texas. And this is for a Dale Coyne team that have not been performing to the greatest standard this season. There's been struggles for Malukas. He's obviously voiced that he's leaving the team and was displeased with some aspects of what's been going on, but he's really hit some form. I mean, he continued the qualifying form he showed at Iowa, where he was excellent in qualifying. He started 6th here at Gateway. He qualified 10th, but was promoted due to the penalties, and he made an excellent start as well. Made his way up to 4th. He made another restart, another move on the restart, the early caution restart to lead the train of McLarens, and really looked incredibly racy. He was competitive with the Penskes again. It was just a bit like last year. He had a bit of a moment of contact with Scott McLaughlin that I don't think McLaughlin was too happy with, but it was just one of those things. Malukas is such an impressive driver. He's so bold, he's so brave, he's massively committed. If he has a moment, he'll keep his foot in. He'll go for moves where it wasn't always the easiest to pass with the marbles building. Yeah, it was excellent. Really, he kind of just managed to make his way up to the podium spots on raw pace, and just a bit like last year, where another lap could have even seen him win the race. He was a little bit disappointed at the checkered flag. He thought he had a race-winning car, but obviously, as we've spoken about with Dixon, doing what he did, it was never going to be a win in the end. But I think Malukas was quite close to even getting an award at the end, and almost making it back-to-back second places at Gateway. So, yeah, good job from David Malukas. He's now 16th in the championship, which, considering there have been a fair amount of issues this year, he had a big string of not even finishing races. This is really impressive, and he's ending the season well and proving why, some major teams should be in for him.
We've heard David Malukas rumored about every name in the IndyCar market. It was Ganassi, Andretti, Ed Carpenter, Rahal, McLaren. Almost every team wants David Malukas' signature. And you can see exactly why. He's proved time and time again how good he is at ovals. Whether that was last year, even this year at Texas, at Gateway. He's always run decently. The 500 as well. Even Iowa, who's pretty strong. And he's becoming a real strong oval driver. But in addition, you look at his road courses, he ran really well mid-high, for example, in Nashville. He's becoming a really strong all-round driver for a team who are you say, in the lower categories of the field. And he just really impresses. He seems very humble. He's a really nice guy, and he's getting these performances in, which is really, really impressive and huge for a small team like Coyne. And as I said, you can see exactly why almost every team wants him. The way he's driving at the minute.
Yeah, I think when something happens as well, he generally goes off and he tries to work on it. And I've seen his Instagram stories, and obviously I don't know him through that, but he seems to really take on everything and be like, okay, we're going to work on this. And even if he has an okay kind of result, he's like, okay, it's still maybe not good enough. Let's see what we can do, and we'll get back, and hopefully it's going to be better. And I feel like that's sometimes something really good to have in a driver, to know when you're doing a good job and kind of congratulate yourself for that, but also to always be pushing and always trying to work on the problem and trying to find the solution. And I feel like to have that could really lead to a really good driver, which he obviously is. And as long as he kind of keeps it up, and I don't know, I feel like he would definitely, depend on where he moves to and what car he'll have, I feel like we'll definitely be seeing him a lot more in a better and just a better way, basically.
Let's have a rundown of the rest of the order, because obviously a lot happened in the race. 4th place was Alexander Rossi. Actually had a pretty quiet race to Rossi. A lot of people thought that had a very, very quiet race. But again, I think it's a 6th top 5 of the season for Rossi. It's almost very quietly had a very decent season. Similarly again, quietly, a very, very respectable race from Rossi.
Yeah, I think Rossi has had a much better season than people have given him credit for, because, as you could also say with his teammate Felix Rosenqvist, you kind of feel he's had some bad fortune at times. He's had some things that just haven't gone his way, and you look at his results. He's not managed to achieve the utmost consistency, but a lot of that has kind of been out of his control. Fifth at the Indy GP, fourth at Gateway. They're two really strong results, and he looks to be ending the season in a very good way. I think people are expecting maybe a winner race at some point. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. It might not happen for the McLaren team as a whole, but yeah, it's a good weekend from Rossi. Again, it was a quiet one, but getting on with his business as he kind of has done all season, and he'll probably be a bit disappointed to be as low as 9th in the championship, but he could easily make up another place in the closing races. So yeah, a good weekend for Rossi.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to say really. It's just sometimes I feel like you don't see much of him, but it's like what you just said. Actually, it's like you don't see much, but he does his job, and that's exactly what he needs to be doing. And yeah.
Yeah, I think qualifying's been a little bit of an Achilles heel for him as well. Qualified 7th here at Gateway, so that was a big improvement, and I think he is making improvements, and he has been making improvements as the season's gone on. And as we spoke about earlier in the season, you can't forget this is a new car for McLaren as well. It's a completely new team as well as just a new driver. So it was always gonna take time to sort of bed in. But he's looking to find his feet now, and I think come next season he'll be in a position where he is competitive with Pato O'Ward more consistently.
P5, Scott McLaughlin. Again, so many people have had a really quiet day. McLaughlin obviously got pole, but he did have a 9th-place penalty for an unapproved engine change. A bit of an interesting incident on Saturday. I think we'll get onto that a bit later on. But again, it's very, very quiet, but McLaughlin continues a very nice run of form, isn't it, at the minute?
Yeah, I think he'll be really happy with his weekend. Maybe not the result, of course, the race result, but I think to get one over on Newgarden in qualifying will be massive for him, because he's been starting to push Newgarden a little bit on short ovals, which is obviously Newgarden's forte, even more so sort of pushing Newgarden in races than Power has been at times. So for McLaughlin to out-qualify Newgarden, and it wasn't just out-qualify, he out-qualified him by 0.5 mile per hour, which is considerable. He also held 1 mile per hour over Colton Herta, who was in 3rd. So that was an excellent qualifying session. It was really unfortunate for McLaughlin, who did seem to have pace during the race. He kind of had... It was around that Malukas area for most of the race, and Malukas thought he had a race-winning car, and as I said, by the end was putting pressure on O'Ward. So if McLaughlin did start that bit further forward rather than having to drop down to 10th, you never know, he could have been competing. But yeah, Dixon, obviously, as I've said, the Dixon factor was there. But yeah, I think it was a good weekend for McLaughlin, and I think the little incident with Malukas might actually have cost him a little bit, because he lost a lot of time trying to just clear the marbles off his tyres and kind of recover from that. It takes a while to recover when you're pushed up high, but yeah, he won't be overjoyed with the race, but to qualify on pole, that's yet another big step in terms of his continued development on ovals, which was always going to be the most difficult thing, moving over from somewhere where ovals just it's obviously moved over to a completely different discipline of racing, but ovals is a completely different style of racing as well. That's his 6th front row of the year, which in a year where Penske have kind of had well-documented struggles in qualifying is massively impressive, actually. And it's his fifth career pole, as I said, the first on ovals, 2 poles now this year. He's ending the season really well. I mean, he's not finished outside of the top 8 since the Indy 500, with worst finish of 8th. Road America, the Indy GP, but a couple of podiums since then, and 5th place was disappointing, but yet another pole. I mean, yeah, you look at his qualifying positions, and that's a front row in all bar one of the last 6 races. So that's pretty remarkable form, really.
Another actually impressive weekend is Colton Herta. He hasn't been great at ovals typically. Andretti have struggled in their oval package, but he had a pretty good qualifying. P3 obviously promoted to P2, the lead non-Penske, which is pretty good achievement nowadays in ovals. And he was actually running quite well, running P2 behind Newgarden for the first stint. Obviously, it was dropped off a bit kind of in that Malukas McLaughlin pack. But again, it's another encouraging sign for Colton Herta. Obviously, started the season in quite torrid fashion, and last couple of races, he's sort of picked it up a bit, which is encouraging to see for Herta and a decent result for him.
Yeah, I think Herta was another one as well who kind of had, one particular moment in the race where you could pinpoint he lost a bit of ground. Obviously, we had cautions after this, but he struggled quite a bit late in the first stint, I think. He tumbled back quite a bit, had to stop a little bit earlier. But yeah, he managed to recoup and recover and finish 6th. That's really strong after an excellent qualifying. It looked like it looked like until the two Penskes, the 2 Penskes that didn't require overnight repairs, as we will come on to. Herta was quite clearly the best of them. So yeah, solid job from him, and it's something to build on.
Yeah, out of all the ovals, you could probably argue this has been Herta's best. Is very close to winning the race in 21 and finished 4th and 6th here in 2020. And it's an encouraging sign. He was comfortably the lead Andretti all weekend. We didn't really see much of any of the other Andrettis at all. And he's continuing taking a step forward. I think for Herta, it's just about getting this consistency sorted. And will he win a race this year? I think Uniseca is going to be a strong bet for sure, but we will have to wait and see how that pans out. But I think encouragement to take from Herta from this weekend. 7th was Palou, as we touched on earlier. 8th was Felix Rosenqvist. Probably, again, not too much to touch on, quite a quiet one, but a strong weekend all round for McLaren and decent result for Rosenqvist in the end. 9th and 10th will all come together. Will Power and Marcus Ericsson. Obviously, their weekend started off in dramatic fashion with a crash in practice. Obviously, McLaughlin spun into turn 1, which made Power take avoiding action. He got up into the marbles, hit the wall, and once it's come back down, unfortunately collected Ericsson on his way back down. Pretty unfortunate accident all the way around. And Ericsson's car, I think, was particularly affected when we came into qualifying. Power's wasn't as strong as the other 2 Penske, so there's also evidence that just his wasn't as strong. Pretty unfortunate for both. I think after what happened on Saturday, they'll take the results they got. But an interesting weekend for the 2 of them.
Yeah, I think as well, Ericsson's probably just glad that he had a car that could actually drive. It was definitely looking like maybe it couldn't get fixed, and he had to kind of change the whole car. He was mixing it with it's Palou's car, I think, having hints of his own. And then I can't remember if it was in qualifying or the race, but then he had a problem with the engine. So then that looked like, after having kind of the bit of relief that he could drive, to then having kind of the dread of, oh, maybe he can't go on. But yeah, I feel like he should be very happy with where he is, considering all that's happened. He was very close to kind of not being able to rest at all, and for something that wasn't really his fault. He was just kind of there and got hit.
But yeah, I think Ericsson was the only one who required a new tub. Obviously, it kind of turned into the number 8 American Husky Legion Honda. It was a bit of a hybrid. But yeah, Ericsson, I think it kind of reflected in qualifying. He did complain about some issues with the engine. He ended up 18th, but it was massively unfortunate for both him and Power, really. Ericsson in particular, just minding his business, and then Power comes rolling down the track, and I think they were slightly lucky it wasn't a complete head-on collision, because Power was spinning that way. But yeah, there was a lot of damage for Ericsson, and there was a lot of damage for Power as well. He needed repairs, and obviously he wasn't completely comfortable come qualifying. They will have been compromised, no doubt, by that. He was 2 miles per hour off McLaughlin, who incidentally was the one who inadvertently triggered the entire issue. I think he remarked that it was one of the scariest moments he's had on an oval. He spun down on the apron and was pretty much facing the track when you don't want that to happen when drivers are going at, around 180 miles per hour, even higher than that at some parts. Power, just like Road America, it was yet another just wildly unfortunate practice incident that compromised him into qualifying. I mean, he had some choice words for McLaughlin in his interview, although I think he probably didn't know it was McLaughlin at that stage, or at least he was blinded a bit by the fury, and he wasn't too happy again. I think he probably calmed down in the end and realised it was his teammate, and it was slightly amusing. It was almost as though he was almost acting as though McLaughlin had done it on purpose just to screw him over. As Will Power does in this sort of interview, kind of feels like everyone's against him. It was just an error. Everyone makes them. And McLaughlin, at the end of the day, is still learning on ovals, surprisingly, given he took pole by such a margin. But yeah, it was a kind of just setting them both on the back foot, really, and scuppered their weekends somewhat. They were kind of recovering from there, and I actually think Ericsson did quite a good job in the race. Power didn't make as much progress, but Ericsson managed his way up from 18th, or at least he qualified 18th. I don't know whether he maybe made up a few places because of penalties, but yeah, Ericsson to finish 10th, he kind of looked like he could match Dixon at times, and I think if he tried to stay on Dixon's strategy, which they didn't do, they brought him in earlier, you never know with Ericsson, he could have maybe made up a bit more headway and, taken a few more positions, but I think after the incident on Saturday night, he would probably be quite content with 10th.
Most important question, worst IndyCar livery of all time, yes or no?
It's up there. It's certainly odd.
It's different. I don't think we'll see that again in a deliberate fashion.
It was just bizarre, the fact that there were little parts from the Husky livery, like I think the wing mirrors and the front wing end plates and a little bit of the halo, and then obviously the number. And other than that, it was just more.
It looked like a sticker.
Yeah, it was just more visibility for American Legion, and Husky will not have been happy with Scott McLaughlin.
Maybe Ericsson's right to leave. We'll get onto that later. Go down the rest of the field. 11th place was VK, who I think that's his equal best finish outside the Indy 500 this year. It is.
Yeah, it's a bit stronger actually. VK in the last couple of weekends. He, I think, was he 11th as well at the Indy GP
last week. Yeah.
So a bit better, slight improvements for Ed Carpenter Racing, who have just kind of continued to have a bit of a dismal season. But VK is proving why, he was quite sought after at some point, and may still end up being sought after if there are teams like McLaren who still need a driver.
12th place was Roman Grosjean, ahead of Santino Ferrucci in 30th. Actually a pretty strong day for Ferrucci. Had a bit of a scary moment in qualifying, but fairly decent day. 14th was Ryan Hunter-Reay. I believe that was his best finish since he's come back to Carpenter. It is, which is encouraging for him. Did a bit of research off the week. This is before Gateway. So Daly had done 7 races for Carpenter, scored 88 points. Hunter-Reay had done 7 races. He brought in 66 points. Now, I'm not going to say too much, but if you're going to drop Daly for performances, at least get a driver who's getting better results.
Yes.
Carl Kirkwood was 15th. Pretty disappointing weekend from Kirkwood, all things considered. Speaking of Conor Daly, he was back for RLL. Obviously, I can't remember if we touched on this last week. We must have done. Harvey was out. Rahal was to get to lead the circle. Conor Daly was brought in. Pretty decent in qualifying, and then he started 11th, I think, and then ends up 16th in the race. The lead RLL. I mean, I think that's probably the best he could have done, and exactly why they brought him in.
Yeah, I do think it was a good weekend for Daly, actually. He was up to speed pretty quickly. He ended up inside the top 10 in practice, and I think qualifying was also solid. He ended up starting P12 after the penalties were applied, so that was good. He couldn't quite capitalise on that, but the Rahal cars, once again, generally as a team, they really struggled. It was another oval weekend that kind of proved that while they're making these improvements on street courses, they already look nailed down as a real contender on road courses. They really need to improve on ovals, and that's probably one reason why you might look to an experienced driver to drive the 30 next year. Maybe someone like Daly, as opposed to a younger driver, just to try and up that oval form, because it was pretty poor. But yeah, Daly came in and I think he got the third best finish for the number 30 car this year, which kind of speaks to the disappointing season that Jack Harvey's had. Yeah, good job from Daly. I don't think he did himself any harm there. Yeah, unfortunate in the end. I think he complained about having a bit of overboost at the start, which meant he dropped down a lot of positions near the start, and I think that was kind of what cost him a finish a little bit higher up. But yeah, he did himself no harm there. It was yet another really good drive. Yes, he finished behind Hunter Ray, but RLL have arguably been the weakest team on ovals this year.
Newgarden was 17th, obviously the RLL. Linus Lundqvist, he was back, probably the last time we'll actually see him this year. He was 18th, his oval debut. He actually set the fastest lap. It was a decent weekend for Lundqvist. He qualified pretty well in 12th. Obviously, that's after penalties applied.
Yeah, I mean, he qualified ahead of Castro Neves and beat Castro Neves in the race, and this is a 4-time Indy 500 winner who is, esteemed on ovals, so Lundqvist is clearly doing something right early in his IndyCar career. His first ever oval race. To come home 18th after qualifying. Qualifying was even better. So that's a really encouraging first oval weekend, and kind of proving why it looks like Ganassi are the place that he will end up next year.
WD Francesco was 19th ahead of Graham Rahal. I think Rahal was just another wretched weekend. There's too much to talk about here. Just hugely disappointing for him. Stingray Rob was 21st. He had a bit of a scary moment for Stingray Rob. He got a bit up high, as several drivers did. But again, he wasn't too far off the pace. A slightly better weekend. Whether we'll see him next year, we don't know. But a decent weekend for Stingray. Canapino was 22nd. Canapino was actually having a fairly decent day until he had a bit of a mishap on the pits. It's been quite a few cases this year where Canapino's actually looked really strong, particularly on ovals, and just something hasn't quite worked out his way. But he is on a similar strategy to Dixon. He always looked like he was in for a top 10 at one point.
Yeah, he was actually up there in the top 10, and unfortunately he, I think coming out of his pit box, made a slight error and hit one of, I don't know whether it was one of Malukas's tyres or it might even have been his pit crew member, and that caused a bit of fury for one of Malukas's crew members who kicked Canapino's front wing. And Canapino unfortunately got a penalty and looked to almost kind of be robbed of what was on track to be arguably his best, possibly going to be his best finish in IndyCar so far. But yeah, again, it shows how quickly he has become accustomed to racing on ovals. Apparently, actually had a bit of a crash, his first big crash in testing at Gateway before this race, but didn't seem to affect him. And yeah, I think it was generally a really strong weekend, even if he didn't have the results to show for it.
23rd was Castro Neves in front of Ed Carpenter. Now, Ed Carpenter, he was miles off the pace in qualifying. He ran into the back of Benjamin Peterson at the start of the race in a really clumsy accident. Just not a great weekend for Carpenter, and there's question marks raised. And should Carpenter carry on? Just a bit of a calamity, really.
Yeah, it's been a rough year for Ed Carpenter in a few ways, really. I think his best finish was Texas. He finished 13th. But other than that, he's been in the 20s. Indy 500 20th. He was involved in a crash later on, obviously. Iowa 24th and 23rd was really bad, to be honest. He actually qualified 4th for, one of his laps was good enough for 4th, but he just had no pace there and qualified last for this race. only managed to make his way up to 24th because of others' incidents. He obviously was culpable for spinning around Benjamin Pedersen for the caution that came out after merely seconds, really. Got a penalty for that. And yeah, obviously off track, the daily decision that, a lot of people are questioning. So yeah, it's not been a good year for Carpenter on this oval-only programme. And, I wonder if he will consider, at least his future in terms of running an entire oval programme, maybe go just to the 500. Yeah, it was a poor race. It was a really poor race to cap off what's not been a very good season for him.
Yeah, pretty messy one. Newgarden was 25th, and talking about a messy weekend, Takuma Sato, he was pretty much all over the place. He had an incident in practice, then he almost looked like he almost crashed twice in the race, and that's after pretty poor qualifying as well. And then he eventually hit the wall. We saw that coming for a long time, and obviously he upset I lot because Sato was laps down and holding people up. It was calamitous event for Sato, and he's someone who was brought in with this experience to get the points whilst Armstrong wasn't racing, and to be honest, he's probably been quite poor, all things considered. I don't think he will be doing an oval-only programme next year. I think we'll probably see him 500 only, but just a really messy weekend to end off what hasn't been a particularly good season.
Yeah, Ganassi will have hoped for a lot more from him. Started the season with a crash in Texas, strong Indy 500, strong first race in Iowa, second race in Iowa. Did he have an incident? He finished 25th. And Gateway.
I can't remember what.
Yeah, I feel like he had some sort of problem. He must have done to end up down there. Yeah, Gateway 26th. He almost crashed twice. Did crash. Ended another driver's race by, when he was a lap down, just running Callum Ilott unnecessarily up high. Ilott tweeted his displeasure at Sato, one of a whole host of drivers that through the years are not too happy with the way Takuma Sato races. Ilott is the latest to feel that, and yeah, he wasn't too happy. That was his race over very early after hitting the wall. But yeah, not great from Sato, really. He gives us fireworks, but I think actually this year it crossed a bit of a line and just became a little bit messy.
I know that at the beginning of this podcast, I was kind of predicting that Sato was going to do kind of like really well, or that he was going to win a couple. But I feel like he's just kind of disappointed, and I feel like everyone kind of just expected more from him, and he hasn't kind of given that. He's probably tried his best, but it's definitely not good enough, especially for the team that he's kind of racing for. Chip Ganassi is a winning team. It wants to kind of be winning, and he wants to be at the top, and the results that he's been given just don't reflect that very well. So I've got to wish him the best, but I don't think he's going to have a full kind of programme. No, full oval programme, should I say.
Last two, kind of might not touch them. Each had a bit of an incident with Sato, followed by Pedersen in 28th.
Yeah, I think on Ilott, actually, I think it's not spoken about enough how well he's taken to ovals. I think, he was actually one of the better average finishers on ovals. I think Jack Benyon from the race mentioned that I think he had maybe the 9th best average finish. Which is, at the end of the day, that's really strong. He's 9th at Texas, 12th in the 500, then 15th and the 14th at Iowa. And he qualified really well. He started 9th with penalties, which was, yet another. They've not had a great season in terms of qualifying. So, Ilott really did a good job there. But yeah, unfortunately, he got Satoed, and he thought there was damage. They came in during his stop. They inspected, didn't think there was anything, but I think he did one more lap and then decided, the car's not right, and that was him done for the day very prematurely. So yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame for Ilott. It was, it'd been a decent season on ovals, but I think he's done enough to prove that he has what it takes to really start succeeding on ovals if he is given the equipment to do so.
So one big change towards the weekend, which I quickly want to talk about, is the use of the alternate tyre. So obviously on ovals, they've traditionally used the primary tyres each weekend, and they gave us one set of alternates to use in practice and one set in the race. Did we like it? Did we not? Would you want to see it again? We're not bothered? What do we think?
I don't think it actually made that much of a difference. It could have been the difference between the race actually turning into a four-stop unless you are Scott Dixon, but yeah, I don't think it does any damage. It adds something else strategy-wise, and I think it lasted a bit longer than people expected. I think they'd used parts of tyres from previous years, so it wasn't a completely new compound. But I think drivers managed to hold on onto it for quite a while. I think Ferrucci was the first. He managed 54 laps towards the start. But yeah, tyre management is a big thing on ovals, on short ovals, and yeah, I think it's another thing to add to the challenge that makes this sort of track so exciting to watch. So I think having one set was, I don't know, would you maybe give even more sets just to add another possible dimension strategy-wise? Although I don't think the teams would necessarily favour running the alternate tyre due to its shorter life. But yeah, I don't think it did any harm. I don't think it, did it make huge differences? Would it have been a four-stop anyway? It's hard to tell, really. But yeah, I don't think it did any harm, I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't even realise that was happening, so I feel that kind of proves that it didn't really make that much of a difference.
Yeah, I don't think it was as big a change as we were anticipating. There wasn't really any significant pace difference. If they carry on with it, fine. If they don't, fine. Yeah, I don't think it was a particularly make or break thing. I would say I wouldn't want to see it somewhere like Texas or Indy. You almost feel it might be a bit dangerous on cars and slightly quicker tyres than other ones. Might work at Gateway, might work at somewhere like Iowa. But it's all right. Nothing really happened, I don't think, in regards to it. So if they want to keep with it, fine. If they don't, I'm not bothered either way.
Agreed.
What I would say about the race, though, is obviously got to be a night race. I think Gateway, dare I say, isn't one of the big events of the year, and I think making it a night race would be much improved. The cars look a lot better under the lights as shown in practice. I think that's a change they need to look at for next year.
Yeah, I think the racing could be slightly better at night as well. It's not necessarily the easiest track to overtake on. That said, there were, I think, 442 total on track passes, 217 for position. So, given it's a race that you consider hard to pass, having 217 passes for position isn't horrendous, but across, 260 laps, that's not a massive amount. I think anything to improve the racing and really just to improve the spectacle and make it more of a unique event, to make it stand out a bit more. And it was great seeing the cars run slightly under the lights after the massive storm that hit on Saturday. Yeah, it was a 2-day weekend, wasn't it, on Saturday? So yeah, it was nice seeing them run under the lights, and obviously last year the race finished in the dark as well. So hopefully that does happen and it does end up being a night race next year.
Yeah, I always kind of just like night races. I feel like it just adds something extra to it, and I feel like maybe it's because it doesn't happen, so then it's kind of new. But kind of just seeing it as well, I feel like it makes it look cooler, which sounds weird, but yeah, just night races should definitely happen a bit more. That's what I say.
Cool. So look at a bit of the news in the offering. We'll start off with the two smaller bits of news, which is to do with next week in Portland, where we got 2 driver replacements. Obviously, in the 60s, Simon Pagenaud still not cleared. He released a statement today just saying he has some symptoms from concussion. So we won't see Pagenaud for the end of the year, whether we'll see him at all. It remains to be seen. It won't be Lundqvist. It's going to be Tom Blomqvist back in for Portland and Laguna. We kind of figured this was because it'd make Lundqvist go over his rookie quota, which obviously Ganassi wouldn't want into next year. So you're going to get Blomqvist in for the last 2 races, and obviously he'll still be under that rookie requirement, which works out nicely for all parties. And it's going to run Portland and Laguna Seca for Pagenaud.
Yeah, I was almost a bit surprised that Lundqvist still ran for the team this weekend, given it, it's transpired that he next year with Ganassi the seeming destination for him, but I do think maybe he had a bit of money left over from his scholarship from winning Indy Lights last year. I think, though, for the final 2 races... Oh, yeah, and actually on that, I'm not sure Blomqvist has ever run an oval before. He could have done the Gateway test, but...
Obviously, Davey was taken too, so...
Yeah, he couldn't have done the test, but... he could have done the test, sorry, but... Yeah, I suppose you put a driver in, even it's just had a little bit of oval experience. It's probably best if they are trying to get in the leader's circle, but it makes sense to put Blomqvist in for the closing races, just more than anything to get his eye in ahead of next year. Just settle a bit more. Obviously, had a good weekend at Toronto, but didn't get any racing experience after it ended early on because of that unfortunate incident that was obviously by no means his fault, but. Yeah, he was showing real pace at Toronto. So 2 road course races to end the season, and hopefully for his sake, he can kind of just get up to speed and kind of get a head start on next season. While, as with Lundqvist, not exceeding the rookie quota, so can still fight for Rookie of the Year next year. Still get the extra set of tyres in practice. So yeah, right, it's an understandable decision, really.
And the other one heading into Portland is going to be for the 30. It's going to be a little change. We're going to see Yuri Vips for the first time racing RLL for both Portland and Laguna Seca, similar to Blomqvist. Vips obviously comes from this F2 background, similar to Eilert, Armstrong and Lundgaard. They're trying to get the leader circle. Vips is rumoured with a seat next year. RLL will use these 2 races to assess his performance. I think it's a pretty exciting move all round.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. We've seen how it's worked out for other drivers that moved over from F2, even Lundgaard in the same team now this season, picking up a couple of poles and a win. And it's a similar situation, really, to Lundgaard, who was tested at the end of 2021 for the team. They decided that what they saw on his debut on the Indy Road Course was plenty enough to warrant him being selected for the team as they transition to 3 cars, and Vips manages to impress in these 2 races. I think, yeah, may as well. It proves to them that he could be worth giving a shot as well, given what's happened with Lundgaard, and Vips actually had better results in F2 anyway. Not that results in F2 have really proven something that you can put too much faith in. It can be quite random at times. It's a very different car. But yeah, it's good to see another driver moving from elsewhere, moving over from Europe. It kind of shows the pull of IndyCar. It'll be interesting to see what RLL do decide to do for next year, because as I mentioned earlier, they really need to turn things around on ovals to try and start firing on all cylinders. And is getting a young rookie in the right decision there? It kind of remains to be seen, but Vips is certainly an exciting talent, and yeah, I think they seem to be looking more ahead to next year and trialing for next year than almost leaders circle. It's a kind of a bit of a weird situation, because putting Daly in, you kind of think, all right, okay, they're looking for leader circle points, getting a strong oval driver in, but then getting a rookie in for the final 2 races is a gamble in that part. So yeah, I don't know what the logic is behind it. I think obviously things got bad with Harvey, and they might just be thinking, it can't get any worse. But yeah, I'll be intrigued to see how Vips does.
Yeah, we've seen all the F2 drivers make a pretty positive impact, and I don't see why Vips would be any different. Obviously, RLL struggled, and Lundgaard's fit in quite nicely, and I think he'd do well. So the big news of the week was Marcus Ericsson is going to be moving to Andretti for next season. I think everyone saw this coming, but it had to be announced eventually, and that news was done this week. I've obviously spoken about this pretty in depth already, but the first puzzle of the driver market has fallen, and it's going to be an interesting move for Ericsson next season.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously we spoke a lot about this in last week's podcast. Speaking about the driver market, it's a move that makes sense for Andretti, getting a driver in who can try and achieve them consistency that they've lacked. With Roman Grosjean, and even looking at Kirkwood and Herta, haven't managed the greatest consistency through the season. So Ericsson should bring that if he continues his form from Ganassi. It works out for him because he'll get paid as he wanted to, and that didn't seem like it was on the table at Ganassi. So yeah, it's expected really, and one domino has fallen now, and probably lots more will start to fall, especially as we've now reached the final 2 races of the season, and once they are over and done with, I think a lot more should start happening in terms of confirmation about moves, and things becoming a bit clearer.
Yeah, I'm also hoping that that more kind of the dominoes fall sooner, because I'm really impatient. So I kind of want to see how it all happens. But this is definitely gonna like cripple it. No, that's the wrong word. This is definitely gonna make them all fall and kind of see the decisions that happen afterwards. It's the first one, and once that kind of happens, everyone else is gonna follow suit, especially to kind of protect themselves. We kind of spoke a bit about this, but with Ericsson going over, where does that leave Roman Grosjean? Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? And hopefully we kind of just see what happens sooner. What happens just as a result of that move.
Yeah, obviously Andretti still remains probably the biggest unknown in the market in regards to 29 car. We all knew this move was going to happen realistically. And I'm excited to see what happens. Will Ericsson prove his worth? How will he compare to the talents of Herta and Kirkwood? It's going to be particularly interesting. So we'll see how that pans out. Ericsson's not been one known for being up the very, very best, but being a solid, consistent driver. So we'll see in regards to that front. But yeah, as we said, hopefully it's just start the dominoes falling, because this driver market changes by the day. And we need some sort of peace of mind at the minute. So there we are. Your Gateway review and all the news in between. So another one next week, straight off the Portland International Raceway, where it looks like the 2023 IndyCar title could go to Alex Palou, but Scott Dixon will be very determined to keep the streak of 16 years in a row going until the final race at Laguna Seca. We'll see if he can do that. Obviously, we said a podium with still Palou the title, whatever happens. I think 7th place is the minimum Dixon needs, whatever happens to Palou. But we will see what happens there. Can he take it to Laguna Seca? We'll have to find out. It's going to be very, very exciting to see what happens. Will the championship be won then? We'll find out next week. Obviously, lots to happen. As we mentioned, Newgarden's under pressure from O'Ward and McLaughlin for further title. McLaughlin won here last year. O'Ward's going pretty strong at the minute. Can Newgarden hold off to further championship? It's going to be a lot to look forward to. Portland next week. So stay tuned, and we'll see you then.